Hey guys, I just wanted to talk to you about blending two exposures. Now, I have here two exposures I shot out at Dead Horse Point for an example for this article, and it is kind of a classic example of using this kind of technique. I have a very, very bright sky and a very, very dark canyon. Relatively flat horizon, that's less important. What you'll notice here in the histogram is that in this darker exposure, I've exposed perfectly for the highlights, which means I have no clipping of the highlights. I do have some clipping of the shadows. So I took a second exposure, a little bit extreme, but I exposed for the shadows, and I've got a lot of latitude here. I actually took a middle frame, and this set of three bracketed shots were 3 stops apart. So in this extreme example, these two frames are 6 stops apart. If I were to just bring the exposure down on this brighter one, 3 full stops, we're going to go -3, type that in there. And then on this darker one, we're going to go +3. So if you toggle back and forth between these two frames, you'll notice there's very little difference in the midtones, or this canyon. I'm looking mainly at the horizon here in what I call the blend zone, and there's not a huge difference other than this darker one has all of the detail in the sky that I need, and I continue to pull the highlights down even more, and that'll help. If we right click, edit in, as layers in Photoshop, we'll find over here in Photoshop I've already got them in there. The most simple basic form of Photoshop is layers and masking, and in this case I have just 2 layers, and I'm going to use one mask. I'm going to apply a white mask to the sky layer. Sky layer is on top, ground on the bottom, sky on top. I'll use my gradient tool, which is right here. I'll make sure that it's set from white to black, foreground color to background color. I'm going to grab somewhere slightly above the horizon here and slightly below the horizon there, holding shift to keep it locked to parallel, and let go. You'll see that I've now blended 2 frames seamlessly without HDR for a very realistic effect. Now you can Command E merge and save, Command S, and it'll take it right back in to Lightroom. Got these filtered, but you'll see here I've got a perfectly blended exposure. And you can see within the histogram I've got no clipping. Continue to bring the highlights down a little more, the shadows up, add some contrast. Now we've got a very dynamic scene captured in one frame.